Hello, Flat Earth researchers, debaters and debunkers. In this video we are going to disprove two claims that you'll often hear from level Earth reality deniers that believe we live on the outside of a spinning globe. The first one being that we see the undersides of clouds being lit up at sunset or sunrise when we see the sun appear to be in that gap between the surface and the clouds that are above us and going off into the distance. The second claim is usually backed by photographs of Mt Rainier casting a shadow, which is claimed to be pointing upwards and cast on clouds that are at about the same height or maybe slightly higher than the top of the mountain itself. So in order to illustrate this, I've put this globe Earth here that is assumed to be rotating with the observer on the top here, looking to the sun, which is over here, and of course it's assumed that we see the sun set as the Earth rotates and we go away from it, and that would cause the sun to appear to go below the horizon. And then what we have here is the sun coming through this gap between the surface of the Earth and the clouds above us, and those clouds are lit up on the undersides. That's the claim from the globe Earth believers. Now, of course, we're taught to believe that we're smart to be able to perceive ourselves from this kind of point of view. It's a view that we've never ever had. We kind of jump out of our reality reference frame to this imaginary reference frame. No one has ever had a view of the Earth from space, and certainly no one has been able to confirm this assumed relationship of the globe Earth with the sun. So it doesn't matter whether the distances or the sizes are to scale according to the heliocentric model. In fact, the entire model is based on a bunch of assumptions and explanations that are called scientific explanations, but no one ever discovered curvature. No one has ever measured curvature, and it actually goes against the real physics of reality. You know, we do not see water curving around a spherical Earth. We do not see clouds curving around a spherical Earth. So as Copernicus did, he just assumed that the Earth is another planet, and he had to do that because the heliocentric model is simply an illustration of the passage of time, and the only way that you can justify the transition of day and night on the Earth, if you assume that the sun is at the center, is to assume that you're on a spherical rotating Earth. It's the only way you can do it once you assume that the sun is at the center of your model. And in my mind, this heliocentric model was created because it was introduced around the same time as the Gregorian calendar, which is a solar calendar. Until then, we were all following a lunar calendar, but then along came the Gregorian calendar and the heliocentric model at about the same time, within decades of each other. And of course, that's just according to the history that we're taught. So Copernicus made these assumptions not based on any measurements or any observations. And it doesn't matter whether you can accurately describe this in a mathematical model. When you have a circle, then you can work with ratios, and it's all just based on time. So these things about 15 degrees per hour is simply an interpretation of the passage of time according to how we see the sun rise and set throughout the year. So this is not anything that was ever measured, observed, or confirmed, and it certainly goes against the actual physics of water on the Earth. We know that water is level. It is always horizontal, and if you want to convert the word level to mean that level is perpendicular, a horizontal perpendicular line to this assumed down towards the center of the Earth, that's just a model. But it goes against what we actually experience in reality. In reality, we're not moving. In reality, there is no curve on the Earth. It is just an illustration. So it doesn't matter that I've illustrated this with this short distance and the sun and the Earth at different sizes. It makes no difference. It's just to illustrate what the globe Earth believer perceives as happening when the sun sets. It's not based on anything that has ever been observed or measured. So, keeping this model in mind, let's go and have a look at some actual sunsets and see if what we see in the real world fits with what is imagineered by the heliocentrists. First, let's look at the science behind cloud formations. Now, of course, there's a huge variety of cloud types, and they've got names that are very difficult to pronounce, but there's no real need to go into too much detail here. We know that different types of clouds form at different heights above the surface, and it will very much depend on the temperature and the humidity and other factors that contribute to forming a cloud at any given time. So any observation is going to be entirely subjective, and we might well see at least 2 or 3 different types of cloud in the sky at the same time. But there are 2 fundamental differences regardless of the kind of cloud that you're looking at. Now, of course, we usually see a blue sky with either white or grey clouds, and that's the fundamental difference that we need to look at here, which is explained, and I'll just read out what's written down here. There are 2 factors that determine the colour of clouds. One is the size of the liquid and solid water particles in the cloud, which are known as hydrometeors. The other is the number of those hydrometeors. If the cloud consists mainly of small droplets and ice crystals, sunlight can enter it relatively easily and is scattered diffusely. These kinds of clouds appear bright white. As the size and concentration of the hydrometeors increases, less and less sunlight penetrates the cloud, resulting in multiple scattering. We perceive these clouds as dark clouds in varying shades of grey. So, very simply put, the light or white clouds are allowing sunlight to pass through them because they are not very dense, whereas the grey clouds are more densely packed and they don't let the sunlight go through them. It's as simple as that. And so when we look at a sunset and we see the clouds change colour, what we actually see is usually a patchwork of these colours. We've got these red, orange and yellow hues, as well as patches of grey. So what's happening basically is the clouds that are usually white, because they are letting light pass through them, will then change to red or yellow and orange as the sun gets further away, but those parts of the clouds are still letting the light pass through them. Whereas we see grey patches as well, and they are simply the clouds that are grey anyway because they are dense and they are not allowing light to pass through them. So now, if you can think about the claim that the sun is setting and lighting up the undersides of clouds, what should happen is the entire cloud base should be lit up, but it's not. We always see these patches of colour and grey. So it means that the sun is still above the clouds. It's just gotten further away, but the light is penetrating the less dense clouds that are usually white, and it's not penetrating the grey clouds because they are dense and not allowing the light to go through them. The sun is not lighting up the undersides of the entire cloud base. So keep this in mind as we look at some footage of clouds at sunset. So that's the first claim, thoroughly disproved simply by observing reality in a scientific way, by taking into consideration all the factors that will affect an observation. Now let's look at this claim that the shadow created by Mount Rainier is directed up towards the clouds with the photograph that we can see here. And as we go through these, you'll see that, of course, it does indeed look as if the shadow of the mountain is pointing up towards clouds that are actually slightly higher than the mountain itself. But if you just study these photographs, we can see in this one, for example, that the sky is already quite well lit, and we do have a lot of light coming through those fairly transparent clouds and even through the gaps in the clouds that we can see over here. But is that shadow actually on the clouds? Is it pointing up to those clouds that we see above the mountain? Well, let's have a look at this scene from a different point of view. Here's a photograph taken from above the mountain, and we can see that in this shot there are no clouds around the mountain, but we still have a shadow that is being cast by the mountain. And of course that's quite normal to have something large blocking off the light, and you could argue in this case that the shadow is just on the ground. Well, let's have a look at another shot, and we'll see in this photograph taken from near the peak of Mt Rainier at sunrise that we have a shadow that is not only on the ground, but it is also in the air at the same height as the person taking the photograph on the mountain. You know that because the shadow goes off into the distance and reaches the photographer's eye level here. So we can see that the shadow is actually in the air, and it is just cutting through the rest of the air that is already well lit by the rising sun. And of course it is quite hazy, so the shadow is cutting through that haze. We don't actually have clouds for the shadow to be directed up towards, but the shadow is there in line with the mountain itself, just cutting through the light air that is surrounding it, that is quite misty and hazy. So we can distinctly see this lack of light. Basically, that's what a shadow is, right? It's just an absence of light. And so you don't need clouds upon which to project this shadow. The shadow exists because it is an absence of light, with the mountain blocking off the light that is already surrounding the rest of the scene. And here we can see the same thing again from the top of the mountain. We see the shadow going off into the distance. There are no clouds, and the shadow is also in the air. It's just an absence of light in the air that is already lit up, albeit a little bit hazy, but there aren't any actual clouds. So the shadow isn't being projected onto the base of clouds. It is just a shaded area of space or air going off into the distance. And I love the effect that we see here. This is an excellent example of perspective. That shadow is not actually changing in size. It is the same width as the mountain, but it is appearing to reach a peak off in the distance there because of perspective. Of course, when we look at the shadow from the other way, we see the shadow getting wider, or appearing to get wider as it comes towards us. Let's just have a look back at these. You see the shadow appears to get wider, but really it's just straight lines of shadow It just depends on our point of view and the laws of perspective that govern any and all observations that we make with our eyes or with cameras. Okay, and here's another shot from a different mountain where we can see the same effect going on. We have no clouds that the shadow is being projected onto. It is simply an absence of light in the surrounding lit up sky. And here's another example of that. We have what is essentially referred to as crepuscular rays created by this cloud here, blocking the light in the same way that the mountain is blocking the light and creating an area that is an absence of light, that is the same size as the cloud itself. It's just as we see it, but we're often led to believe that the crepuscular rays are light that is traveling in parallel lines. It's not necessarily the light that is creating parallel lines, it is the shadow or the absence of light that creates parallel lines. And here we see again, we've got a sun that is below the clouds that we see there, but it's not lighting up the undersides, it's lighting up the sky above the clouds, and the clouds are blocking the light and creating this appearance of crepuscular rays because we have these lines of shadow created by the clouds. And here we see the same thing happening here. The light appears to be rays, but when you look at it, you can see that actually the entire sky is lit up, but the clouds are creating these lines of absence of light, shadow. And the same thing happening here. And again, we have perspective at play. These lines of shadow are straight parallel lines, the same size as the clouds, but of course it appears to widen. These gaps of light appear to widen because of our perspective, the way we are looking at this scene. And when we look at these crepuscular rays or shadows from above, this top-down perspective, we can see that in actual fact those shadows are straight lines that are the same size as the clouds, and again they are just the absence of light in a sky that is fully lit by sunlight. It is bathed in sunlight, but the shadows are the absence of light because the clouds are blocking off the light and creating those shadows. This is something to bear in mind when we are shown mock-up images of an eclipse, for example, and we see this idea that the moon's shadow somehow narrows. It doesn't. Shadows don't do that. They actually do this. They just create straight lines. And here we have a shot. Now, some of you globe earthers might find it ironic that I'm using a photograph taken from the ISS looking down on the Earth. But I ask you, does this look like a photograph that was taken 250 miles above the Earth? It doesn't look like that to me. I'd say it's much, much closer. And we don't seem to be far enough away from the Earth to be in some kind of vacuous space. Looks to me like we're still well within the Earth's so-called atmosphere. But again, what we can see here is these straight lines created by shadows that would then give us this impression of crepuscular rays. But it's not the light that's traveling in parallel lines, it's the shadows that are going in parallel lines. Okay, there we go, another beautiful scene. So there we go, two claims made by globe earth proponents that have been thoroughly disproved simply by looking at reality and taking into consideration the way we see the world around us. And before I go, I'd like to give my thanks to those of you who are supporting me through Patreon. So thank you to Leon, Bruce Stevens, David Marks, Shen and Al. Your contributions are helping make these videos possible, and hopefully we are waking up a few more people to the reality of the world that we live in. If you'd like to join as a Patreon member, you can do so for as little as £5 or £10 a month and join our regular collaboration meetups and get exclusive content as well. I'll leave a link in the description and look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thank you very much.